Just waiting for sound. I like to gesticulate.
Ladies and gentlemen, to me, the world's #1 nutritional doctor in the world, no question about it. So great to have him here, Dr. Michael Greger.
Check, check, 1, 2. How's that sound? The cheap seats in the back. All right. Welcome. Allow me to begin on a personal note. This is a picture being taken around the time that my grandmother was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease and sent home to die. She already had so many bypass operations, basically run out of plumbing at some point, could find a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. Her life was over at age 65. But then she heard about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers. And what happened next is detailed in Pritikin's biography. My grandma was one of the death's door people. Frances Greger, my grandmother, arrived at one of Pritikin's early sessions in a wheelchair. Mrs. Greger had heart disease, angina claudication, her condition so bad she could no longer walk without great pain in her chest and legs. But within 3 weeks, though, she was not only out of her wheelchair, she was walking 10 miles a day. This is a picture of my grandma. Taken 15 years after doctors had abandoned her to die at her grandson's wedding. She was given her medical death sentence at age 65. Thanks to a healthy diet, she was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet till age 96. To enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. Medicine. Excellent. When Dr. Dean Ornish published his lifestyle heart trial years later, proven with something called quantitative angiography that indeed heart disease could be reversed in the majority of patients, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery, just a plant-based diet, another healthy lifestyle behaviors. I assumed this was going to be the game changer. I mean, my family had seen it with their own eyes, but here it was, in black and white, published in some of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, yet nothing happened. So wait a second, if effectively the cure to our #1 killer, heart disease, could get lost down some rabbit hole and ignored, what else might there be in the medical literature that could help my patients? But I just didn't have a corporate budget driving its promotion. Well, I made it my life's mission to find out. For those of you unfamiliar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world, so busy folks like you
don't have
to. And it used to be 13,000 a year, now it's 31,000 articles a year. That's 87 articles a day. I've been busy. I then compile all the most interesting, most groundbreaking, most practical findings to new videos and articles I upload every day to my nonprofit site, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There are no ads, no corporate sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything, just putting it up as a public service, as a labor of love, as a tribute to my grandma. New videos and articles every day on the latest in evidence-based nutrition. What a concept. So where did Pritikin get his evidence from? Well, a series of a network of missionary hospitals set up throughout sub-Saharan Africa uncovered what may be one of the most important medical advances, according to one of the most preeminent medical figures of the 20th century, Dr. Dennis Burke, the fact that many of the major and commonest diseases here were universally rare, like heart disease. In the African population, Uganda, for example, coronary heart disease almost non-existent. He said, wait a second, our number one killer? Almost non-existent. What were they eating? Well, they were eating lots of vegetables and grains and greens, and their protein almost exclusively from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol levels to prove it, very similar to what one sees in modern day plant eaters. So, wait a second, maybe they were just dying early, never lived long enough to get heart disease. No, here's age-matched heart attack rates in Uganda versus St. Louis. Out of 632 autopsies in Uganda, only one myocardial infarction. Out of 632 age and gender matched autopsies in Missouri, 136 myocardial infarctions, more than 100 times the rate of our leading killer. In fact, they're so blown away. We went back, did another 800 autopsies in Uganda, still just one small field infarct, meaning it wasn't even the cause of death. Out of 1,427 patients, less than 1 in 1,000. Whereas here, heart disease is an epidemic. Here's a list of diseases commonly found here in places that eat and live like the U.S., but were rare or even non-existent among populations centering their diets around whole plant foods. These are among our most common diseases, like obesity, for example, hiatal hernia, one of the most common stomach problems, varicose veins and hemorrhoids, the two most common venous problems. Colorectal cancer, leading cancer killer. Diverticulosis, the most common disease of the intestine. Appendicitis, number one cause of emergency abdominal surgery. Gallbladder disease, number one cause of non-emergency abdominal surgery. As well as ischemic heart disease, our commonest cause of death here, but a rarity among plant-based populations, which suggests that heart disease may be a choice. Like cavity. You know, if you look at teeth of people who lived 10,000 years before the invention of the toothbrush, pretty much no cavity. Didn't brush a day in their life. No flossing. Yet no cavities. Why? Because candy bars hadn't been invented yet. So wait a second, why do people continue to get cavities when we know they're preventable through diet? Well, simple. Because the pleasure people derive from dessert may outweigh the cost and discomfort of the dentist chair. And look, that's fine. As long as you understand the consequences of your actions as physicians, what more can we do? I mean, if you think the benefits outweigh the risks for you and your family, then go for it. I certainly enjoy the occasional indulgence. I've got a good dental plan. But what if instead of the plaque in our teeth, we're talking about the plaque building up inside of our artery? Another disease that can be prevented through changes in our diet. Okay, now we're not talking about scraping tartar anymore. Now what are the consequences for you and your family? Right? The number one reason that our loved ones will die is heart disease. Now it's still up to each of us. to make our own choices as to what to eat and how to live, but we should make these choices consciously, educating ourselves about the predictable consequences of our actions. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, is a disease that begins in childhood. By age 10, nearly all kids raised on a standard American diet already have what are called fatty streaks. The first stage of the disease, these turn into plaques in our 20s, get worse in our 30s, and then can start killing us all. So if there's anyone here this evening older than age 10, then the question is not whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease, it's whether or not you want to reverse the heart disease you already have. Is that even possible? When researchers took people with heart disease, put them on the kind of plant-based diets followed by people that did not get heart disease, their hope was that maybe we could slow it down, perhaps even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. As soon as people stopped eating artery-clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery, suggesting that their bodies wanted to be healthy all along, but were just never given the chance. This remarkable improvement in blood flow to the heart muscle itself was after just 3 weeks eating healthy. Let me share with you what's been called the best kept secret in medicine. The best kept secret in medicine is that sometimes, under the right conditions, the body can actually heal itself. You know, when if you whack your shin on a coffee table, it can get all red hot, painful, swollen, inflamed, but will heal naturally if you just stand back, let your body work its magic. But what if you kept whacking your shin in the same place day after day? In fact, 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You never heal. You go to your doctor and be like, oh, my shin hurts. They'd be like, no problem. Whip out their pad, write your prescription for painkiller. You're still whacking your shin 3 times a day. Oh, it still really hurts, but oh, it feels so much better with those pain pills on board. Thank heavens for modern medicine. It's like when people take nitroglycerin for crushing chest pain. Tremendous relief. We're not doing anything to treat the actual cause of the disease. Our body wants to come back to health if we let it. But if we keep re-damaging ourselves 3 times a day, we may never heal. It's like smoking. Now, within 15 years of stopping smoking, your lung cancer risk approaches that of a lifelong non-smoker. Isn't that amazing? Like your lungs can clear out all that tar, and eventually it's almost as if you never started smoking at all. And every morning of our smoking life, that healing process started until wing! Our first cigarette of the day. Re-injuring our lungs with every puff, just like we can re-injure our arteries with every bite, when all we had to do all along, the miracle cure, is just stand back, get out of the way, stop re-injuring ourselves, and let our body's natural healing processes bring us back towards health. Sure, you can choose moderation and hit yourself with a smaller hammer. But why beat yourself up at all? The human body is a self-healing machine if we just let it do its work. This is nothing new. American Heart Journal, 1977, cases like Mr. F.W. here, heart disease so bad couldn't even make it to the mailbox, started eating healthier. A few months later, he was climbing mountains, no pain. Now, there are these fancy new classes of anti-angina drugs on the market. Now, it costs thousands of dollars a year, but at the highest dose, may be able to extend exercise duration as long as 33.5 seconds. It does not look like those choosing the drug route will be climbing mountains anytime soon. See, so plant-based diets aren't just safer and cheaper, they can work better because you're treating the actual cause of the disease. Heart disease is a #1 killer. The #2 killer in this country is cancer. What happens if you put cancer on a plant-based diet? Well, Dr. Dean Ornish and colleagues were able to show that they could reverse the progression of prostate cancer using the same plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors, and no wonder. If you take people eating the standard American diet, drip their blood onto cancer cells growing in a petri dish, you can suppress the growth of that cancer by about 9%. But you put people on a plant-based diet for a year, though, and their blood can do this. The blood circulating throughout the bodies of those eating plant-based has nearly 8 times the stop-in power when it comes to suppressing cancer cell growth. Now, this was for men in prostate cancer. They wanted to repeat this study using women in breast cancer. But look, the #1 cancer killer specific to women, but they didn't want to wait a whole year to get the results. Women are dying now. So they said, well, let's see what a plant-based diet can do in just 2 weeks against 3 different lines of human breast cancer. This is the before, cancer cell growth powering away at 100%, and then this is after eating healthy for 2 weeks. This is what's called a photomicrograph. A photograph taken under a microscope. What researchers did is lay down a carpet of breast cancer. It's called a confluent layer, and then drip the blood, limiting the standard American diet, onto that layer. And as you can see, it kind of breaks up the cancer into these kind of cancer continents here. Then they took these same women, put them on a plant-based diet, and retested 2 weeks later. So same women, so they act as their own controls. This is the before, put them on a plant-based diet for 2 weeks, and then lay down another carpet of breast cancer and drip their blood 2 weeks later, and all you're left with is this. Just a few individual cancer cells left, their bodies cleaned up. Before and after, just 2 weeks eating healthy. Their bodies became that much more hostile to cancer. Now, suppressing cancer cell growth is nice, getting rid of it is even better. This is what's called apoptosis, programmed cell death. Their bodies were able to reprogram the cancer cells, forcing them into early retirement. This is what's called tunnel imaging, measuring DNA fragmentation or cell death, where dying cancer cells show up as little white spots. So you can see here's one dying cancer cell here. So even if you're a woman eating a pretty poor diet, you're not totally defenseless. You can knock off a few cancer cells. But you take these same women 2 weeks later, and their blood can do that. It's like you're an entirely different person inside. The same blood now circulating throughout these women's bodies, gaining the power to significantly slow down and stop breast cancer cell growth after just 2 weeks eating healthy. What kind of blood do we want in our body? What kind of immune system? We want blood that just kind of rolls over when new cancer cells pop up? Do we want blood circulating to every nook and cranny in our body with the power to slow down and stop? Now, this dramatic strengthening of cancer defenses was after 2 weeks of a plant-based diet and exercise. They had these women out walking 30 to 60 minutes a day. You say, well, wait a second. If you do 2 things, how do you know what role the diet played? So researchers decided to put it to the test. This is measuring the same cancer cell clearance, and this is what we saw before, healthy diet and exercise. Here, on average, for 14 years, plant-based diet, 14 years, along with mild exercise, just like out walking every day, that's the kind of cancer cell clearance you get. Compare that to the cancer-stopping power of your average sedentary American. See a little burger there. I don't know if you can see that. Which is essentially non-existent. All right, here's the interesting column in the middle. What about 14 years, not plant-based, 14 years standard American diet, but 14 years daily, strenuous, hour-long exercise like calisthenics. They wanted to know if you exercise long enough, if you exercise hard enough, can you rival some strolling plant eaters over here? And the answer is exercise helped, no question. But literally 5,000 hours in the gym, no match for a plant-based diet. This is that same tunnel imaging we saw before. Even if you are a couch potato, living off of fried potatoes, you're not totally defenseless. You can kill off a few cancer cells. If you exercise for 5,000 hours, you can kill cancer cells left and right. But nothing appears to kick more cancer tush than a plant-based diet. And our current theory, our current understanding is that it's because animal protein, meat, egg white, and dairy protein, increases the levels of something called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is a cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in the acquisition and progression of malignant human tumors. But if you cut down your intake of animal protein, within 2 weeks you can drop the levels of IGF-1 in your body. If you continue eating healthy, they drop even further. And your levels of IGF-1 binding protein go up. IGF-1 binding protein is like our body's emergency brake, one of our ways our body protects itself from cancer, protects itself from excessive growth. Sure, in as little as 2 weeks, you can drop your production of IGF-1, but wait a second. What about all the IGF-1 you have circulating in your system from the bacon and eggs you had 3 weeks ago? Well, your liver releases this snatch squad of binding proteins into your bloodstream to tie up any excess IGF-1, pull it out of the system. Your protective levels go up within weeks, and benefits continue to accrue the longer you eat healthy. Here's the experiment that really nailed IGF-1 is the villain. Same thing we saw before, diet and exercise, cancer cell growth plummets, cancer cell death shoots up. Here's the interesting columns here. What if you add back to the cancer just the amount of IGF-1 you banished from your system because you started eating healthy? What happens? You essentially erase the diet and exercise effect. It's almost as if you never started eating healthy at all. And so that's why we think that the largest study on diet and cancer ever showed that the incidence of all cancers combined were lower among those eating more plant-based diets because they're eating less animal protein, less meat, egg white, and dairy protein, so they have less IGF-1 in their system, and so they have less cancer growth. How much less cancer growth? Well, those men and women who eat lots of protein in middle age have 75% increased risk of dying prematurely and about a 4-fold increased risk of dying specifically from cancer. But not all protein, specifically just animal protein. And why? Well, that makes sense given the IGF-1 story that I just mentioned. The academic institution where the study was done sent out a press release with a memorable opening line. That chicken wing you're eating could be as deadly as a cigarette. Explaining that, look, I mean, a 4-fold increased risk of dying from cancer, that's comparable to smoking cigarettes. So what was the nutrition science community's response to this revelation that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to the health of smoking? Well, one nutrition scientist said it was potentially dangerous to tell people about the study. Why? Because people might think, a smoker might think, hey, why bother quitting smoking? My ham and cheese sandwich is going to be just as bad for me. So let's not tell anyone about the meat and cheese thing. Shh. It reminds me of a famous Philip Morris cigarette ad that tried to downplay the risk by saying, hey, You think secondhand smoke is bad, increasing your risk of lung cancer 19%. Well, hey, drinking 1 or 2 glasses of milk every day, maybe 3 times as bad, increasing your risk of lung cancer 62%. Or doubling your risk frequently cooking with oil, or tripling your risk of heart disease by eating non-vegetarian, or multiplying your risk 6-fold if you eat lots of meat and dairy. So they conclude, let's keep some perspective here. The risks from everyday activities may be the risk from secondhand smoke may be well below that of other everyday activities. So breathe deep. It's like saying, yeah, don't worry about getting stabbed, because getting shot so much worse. How about neither? 2 risks don't make a right. Of course, you'll note that Philip Morris stopped throwing dairy under the bus once they purchased Kraft Foods. Just saying. All right, so every year the CDC compiles the top 15 causes of death in the United States. Killer number 1, cancer. Killer number 1, heart disease. Killer number 2, cancer. I thought, well, let's just go through the list, 1 through 15. Talk about the role diet may play in preventing, arresting, and reversing our top 15 killers. 2 down, just 13 to go. Top 3 killers in the U.S. used to be heart disease, cancer, stroke. Oh, that's so 2009. Now, it's heart disease, cancer, and COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases like emphysema. Thankfully, plant-based diet can be used to help prevent COPD, can even be used to treat COPD, significantly improving lung function over time. But you know, the tobacco industry had a very different spin on this. I mean, if adding plants to our diet can improve lung function, wouldn't it be easier to just add plants to cigarettes? And indeed, the addition of acai berries to cigarettes evidently has a protective effect against emphysema in smoking mice. Who would have thunk it? Next, they're going to start putting berries in meat. And indeed, I couldn't make this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. The addition of fruit extracts to burger patties was not without its glitches. The blackberries dyed the burger patties a distinct purplish color, kind of turned people off a little bit. Though evidently you can improve the tenderness of lamb carcasses if you infuse them before rigor mortis sets in with kiwi fruit juice. You can even improve the nutritional profile of frankfurters by adding powdered grape seeds, though there were complaints that the grapeseed particles became visible in the final product. And if there's one thing we know about hot dog eaters, it's that they're picky about what goes in their food. Oh, pig anus. Oh, but grapeseeds. Oh! Killer number 4, though, is indeed stroke. Preventing strokes may be all about eating potassium-rich foods. Potassium, yet most Americans don't even reach the recommended minimum intake of potassium, and by most, I mean more than 98%. More than 98% of Americans eat potassium-deficient diets because 98% of Americans don't eat enough plants. Potassium comes from the word potash. You take any plant, put it in a pot, reduce the ash, you're left with potassium, potassium, vegetable alkali. So it's got its name. But who can name me one plant food in particular high in potassium? Bananas, of course. You know, it's funny, I go speak all around the world, and the one thing everybody seems to know about nutrition, bananas, that's like the one thing, I don't know, like Chiquita had a great PR firm or something, but it turns out bananas don't even make the top 50 sources of potassium, coming in at number 86, right behind fast food vanilla milkshakes. So those bananas. It's funny, when I was writing the new book, I went back to make sure that the USDA nutrient database hadn't changed, and indeed it had. They expanded now. Bananas don't even make the top 1,000 sources, coming in at number 1,611, right after Reese's Pieces. I kid you not. The most concentrated sources of potassium in the American diet: number 1, greens; number 2, beans; and number 3, dates. Again, bananas don't even make the top 1,000. In fact, if you look at our next leading cause of death, bananas, could be down right there. Alzheimer's disease. It's our next leading killer. 20 years ago it wasn't even in the top 10. 4 million Americans affected. According to the latest dietary guidelines for the prevention of Alzheimer's disease, the 2 most important things we can do: number 1, cut down our intake of meat, dairy, and junk, and increase our intake of vegetables, legumes, which are beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, fruits, and whole grains. And this is based in part on data going back decades now, showing that those that eat meat, red meat, white meat, didn't matter, were between 2 to 3 times as likely to become demented later in life, and the longer one ate meat-free, the lower the risk of dementia dropped. Killer number 7, type 2 diabetes, a disease that can be prevented, treated, and reversed with a plant-based diet, something we've known since the 1930s. Put a group of diabetics on a plant-based diet, and within 5 years, a quarter of the diabetics ended off all their insulin altogether. But plant-based diets are relatively low-calorie diets, right? And so maybe their diabetes just got better because they lost so much weight. To tease that out, what you'd have to do is design a study where you put people on a plant-based diet, but force them to eat so much food that they don't lose any weight. And then you can see if there's particular, specific benefits to a plant-based diet beyond just all the easy weight loss. Well, we'd have to wait a few decades, but here it is. They had subjects wait every day. If they started to lose weight, they were made to eat more food. In fact, so much food, some of the participants had problems eating it all. They're like, oh, not another salad. Oh. But eventually they adapted, so no weight loss, despite restricting meat, eggs, dairy, and junk food. Okay, so with 0 weight loss, was there still a benefit to eating plant-based? Well, insulin needs were cut 60%, and half the diabetics ended off all their insulin altogether. Wow, how many years did that take? No, 16 days. 16 days later. So we're talking diabetics who've had diabetes as long as 20 years, injecting 20 units of insulin a day, then 13 days later on none. Diabetes for 20 years, then off all insulin in less than 2 weeks. Diabetes for 20 years because no one had told her about a plant-based diet. Here's participant number 15. 32 units of insulin on the control diet, and then 18 days later on none. Lower blood sugars on 32 units less insulin. That's the power of plant. Even with 0 weight loss, his body just worked that much better. And what's the side effects? You get the bonus. Their cholesterol dropped like a rock to under 150. Again, only about 2.5 weeks. So, just like, making modest changes in one's diet will only gain modest reductions in cholesterol, how modest do you want your diabetes? everything in moderation may actually be a truer statement than many people realize. Asking diabetics to make moderate changes in their diet can leave them with moderate blindness, moderate kidney failure, moderate amputation, maybe just a few toes or something. Everything in moderation may be a truer statement than many people realize. Remember that study that purported to show that diets high meat, eggs, and dairy can be harmful health as smoking supposedly found that those who eat lots of meat, eggs, and dairy are 4 times as likely to die from cancer or diabetes. But if you look at the actual study, you'll see that's simply not true. Those eating lots of animal protein during middle age weren't 4 times as likely to die from diabetes. They had 73 times the risk of dying from diabetes. Now, those that chose moderation, just eating a moderate amount of animal protein, they just had 23 times the risk of death from diabetes. Killer number 8 is kidney failure. Plant-based diets can be used to both treat and prevent kidney failure, and no wonder. Kidneys are highly vascular organs. Harvard researchers found 3 dietary risk factors for declining kidney function. Number 1, animal protein. Number 2, animal fat. Number 3, cholesterol. Animal fat can alter the actual structure of the human kidney based on studies like this showing plugs of fat literally kind of clogging up the works in autopsied human kidneys. And the animal protein can have a profound effect on normal kidney function, inducing something called hyperfiltration, increasing the workload on the kidneys, but not plant protein. So, for example, if you give people a single meal of tuna fish, there's a significant increase in pressure within the kidneys within 1, 2, 3 hours after the meal in both non-diabetics and diabetics. So we're talking adverse effects, not decades down the road, but literally within hours of it going into our mouth. Now, what if instead of eating a tuna fish salad sandwich, you had the exact same amount of protein, but in a tofu salad sandwich? What happens? Absolutely nothing. Your kidneys can handle plant protein without even batting an eyelid. So, wait a second, why does animal protein cause that overload reaction, but not plant protein? We think it's because of the inflammation triggered by animal protein. How do we know? Because if you give a powerful anti-inflammatory drug along with that tuna fish, you can abolish that protein leakage hyperfiltration response to meat ingestion. And then there's the acid load. The consumption of foods like meat, eggs, and dairy induces the formation of acid within our kidneys, which causes something called tubular toxicity, damage to the delicate urine-making tubes within the kidneys. See, animal products tend to be acid-forming, particularly fish. That's the worst. Fish, pork, poultry, but mostly fish. Whereas plant foods tend to either be neutral or actually base-forming, alkaline, particularly dark green leafy vegetables, to counteract some of the acid formed from people's diets. So the key to halting the progression of chronic kidney disease may lie in the produce aisle rather than the pharmacy. So no surprise that doctors have been using plant-based diets to treat kidney failure for decades now. This is protein leakage on a standard low sodium diet. That's typically what physicians would traditionally put people on whose kidneys are starting to fail. But then they switched them to the supplemented vegan diet, back to conventional, plant-based. Conventional, plant-based, switching on and off kidney dysfunction like a light switch based on what was going into their mouth. Killer number 9 is respiratory infections. Say, wait a second, what possible role, good time to cough, what possible role could diet play in respiratory infection? Well, obviously you haven't seen my video, Kale and the Immune System, talking about the immunostimulatory effects of kale. Is there anything kale cannot do? Boosting antibody production 7-fold. This is in a petri dish. What about in people? Well, if you take people between the ages of 65 and 85, you split them up into 2 groups right before getting the Pneumovax vaccination, the pneumonia vaccination. Half continue to eat the regular diet, the other half you just add a few servings of fruits and vegetables. What happens? Significantly boosted antibody response in those that ate more fruits and vegetables. This is not cutting out meat or anything. Just adding a few servings of produce to your daily diet can significantly boost your immune function. Killer number 10 is suicide. We know for years that people that eat healthier tend to feel healthier. Just half the levels of depression, anxiety, and stress scores compared to those that eat meat. We think it's because of this long-chain inflammatory omega-6 fatty acid called arachidonic acid, which is found predominantly in chicken and eggs. So yes, some found in beef, sausage, etc., other animal products, but predominantly chicken and eggs. So what they did is they took researchers at University of Arizona, took people eating the standard American diet, removed eggs, chicken, other meat from their diet, and got a significant improvement in mood within just 2 weeks. You can take drugs, most will take an effect. In 2 weeks, significant improvement in mood. Why? Well, we think this arachidonic acid is adversely impacting mental health via a cascade of neuroinflammation, brain inflammation. But we may be able to clear this inflammation from our brains within just 2 weeks by cutting down our intake of eggs, chicken, and other meat. Wait a second, am I just cherry picking here? What about all the other different diets that have been proven to improve mood? There aren't any. Here's the latest review. Found just that plant-based dietary intervention that I talked about. The only study ever, the randomized control study ever showed any kind of diet could significantly improve mood under any kind of time scale. And works in a workplace setting too. This is at Geico Insurance, where they added some healthy options to the cafeteria, like lentil soup, bean burritos. Significant improvements not only in physical function, general health, vitality, but also mental health. And that translated into improved worker productivity. So the company said, aha, expanded this across 10 corporate sites across the country, including, I think, down here in Georgia. And they found significant improvements. So they did control sites where they didn't tell people about a healthy diet, and found that in the sites where they actually did, there are significant improvements in depression, anxiety, fatigue, emotional well-being, daily function, as well as emotional health. So lifestyle changes like exercise can boost both mental as well as physical health, and diet-wise, plant-based diets have the most evidence to support them. Killer number 11 is systemic blood infection. Sure, a foodborne bacteria can burrow through the intestinal wall and get into your bloodstream, but in women can creep up into the bladder. We've known for decades that's actually bacteria crawling up from the rectum that cause bladder infections in women, but we didn't know where this reservoir of UTI-causing bacteria was coming from until now, and it's chicken. We now have DNA fingerprinting proof of a direct link between farm animals, meat, and bladder infections in women. Solid evidence of that urinary tract infections can be what's called a zoonosis, an animal-to-human disease, where the E. coli from chicken colonize your digestive tract and then can creep up into your bladder. You say, wait a second. Who undercooks chicken, right? I mean, can't you just buy a meat thermometer, cook the meat through? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is what's called cross-contamination. So you take 40 families, give them a frozen chicken, each to cook and prepare as they normally would, And what happens is multitudes of antibiotic-resistant bacteria jump from the chicken into the guts of the volunteer even before they eat it. So you can incinerate that chicken to ash. You don't even have to eat any of it. You're already infected before it even makes it into the oven. Within days, the chicken bacteria had multiplied to the point of becoming a major part of the person's gut flora. The chicken bacteria was like taking over. You say, okay, well, what if I practice not only safe cooking guidelines, but safe handling guidelines? Not that anyone actually does this, but if you actually instruct people on the official USDA recommendations for handling chicken and other raw meat, you got to use a bleach solution, you wipe everything down, and all right. So you instruct people how to do this, and then you go into their kitchens afterwards and swab around. What do you find? You found significant levels of Salmonella, Campylobacter, serious human pathogens on some utensils, dishcloth, counter, sink rim, cupboard. The reason: there is more bacteria from feces in people's kitchen sinks compared to their toilet seat is because people tend to rinse chickens in the sink, not the toilet. So unless our kitchen is like some biohazard lab, right, the only way we're going to guarantee not leaving infection around the kitchen is to not bring it into our homes in the first place. Now, but the good news is, it's not like you eat chicken once and you're colonized for life. In this study, chicken bacteria only seemed to last about 10 days before their good bacteria could kind of muscle it out of the way. The problem is many families eat chicken more than once every 10 days, and so may be constantly reintroducing these chicken bugs into their system. Wait a second, you can't sell unsafe cars, you can't sell unsafe toys. How is it even legal to sell unsafe meat? Well, they do it by blaming the consumers. When USDA poultry microbiologist said, look, raw meats are not idiot-proof, they can be mishandled when they're like handling a hand grenade. You pull the pin, someone's going to get hurt. Now, well, some may question the wisdom of selling hand grenades in supermarkets, or poultry microbiologists disagree, saying, no, it's the consumer that has the most responsibility, just refuse to accept it. It's like a car company saying, yeah, we installed faulty brakes, but it's your fault for not